All right. Are you guys here? Can you guys hear me, see me? If not, let me see. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Can you guys hear me? Drop into the chat if you are here with us. I know it takes like a little bit of a delay. All right, Krista's here, so we got one person. Hello, hello, hello. All right, hear you. Sweet, awesome. Well, glad you guys are here. Drop into the chat. I'm interested. I've got an agenda that I want to go through and a few things I want to talk about. But then we're going to answer any questions you guys have. But go ahead and tell me right now. I'm curious where you guys are at. As you know, or maybe you don't know, this is my wife, Hannah, by the way, if you haven't seen her before. And yeah, so where are you guys coming from? We are currently in southern Alabama near the beach. So Krista's from Boise. We love Boise. Boise's like one of our favorite spots we've ever traveled to. So that's super cool. Chicago, that's awesome. Michigan,
Australia,
Queensland. Wow, that's quite the ways. What time is it there right now? It's like in the morning, right? 7 something. Rockland, Maine, Western Wisconsin, Minneapolis, Oklahoma, Cleveland, LA. Ooh, Charleston, South Carolina. That's awesome. We love Charleston. Chicago. Hey, you said Boise.
I know
Yeah,
somebody
see?
told us that while
That's
we were
right.
there.
That's
Yep.
right. We know. 10 a.m. Okay, that's not bad. Fort Walton Beach. Nice. Not too far from where we're at. Kentucky, New Jersey, New York State. Wow, we got a lot of people. Awesome. Toronto. Is it Toronto or Toronto, Michael? Texas, Colorado. Love it. Y'all are awesome. We got a good group. Okay. Well, cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Here's how this is going to work. So Hannah's here with us. She's manning the chat. If you have any questions at all, feel free to drop them in anytime. Hannah's going to be Toronto. Love it. Toronto with the A. Okay. So if you have any questions at all, you can drop them in the chat at any time. And we're going to keep them organized. We're going to try to get to everybody's questions, which I think we should be able to.
There is a little bit of a lag.
I know there is a lag. Yeah, there's definitely a lag. So I think like 20 or 25 seconds. So if you need to be, I know you're sort of half and half.
Your mom's here too.
Is my mom here? Awesome. Great. Hi, Mom. Good to see you. All right. Okay, so here's what I want to do to kick us off. If you've watched any videos recently or you've listened to our Amazon Echo Alexa skill, we've talked a lot about this book. This book is called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And it's just a really, really great book. And it's very poignant for the time we're at in history. Hey, Shelly, good to see you. Always good to see you. So I want to open up tonight by reading a couple of things from this book to hopefully set the tone, right? Because we're living in a crazy time period right now with the coronavirus and the stock market going absolutely wild, causing a lot of craziness, both on the health side and then obviously on the finance side. And so to hopefully open up tonight's call, I want to read from this. So I'm going to read from page 40. This is from a chapter called Is It Up to You? All right. And he has a quote right here from an old say that word for me. This is why I need Hannah.
I don't know.
Okay.
We nailed it.
Here's the quote. This is the important part. In life, our first job is this: to divide and distinguish things into two categories. Externals I cannot control, but the choices I make with regard to them, I do control. Where will I find good and bad in me, in my choices? All right. And then what I want to kind of talk about is the importance of recognizing the difference between what we can control and what we can't control, right? So with the stock market being wild, with potentially getting laid off from our job if it comes to it, with getting, a lot of the side effects of what's going on right now, there are things that we can control and there are things that we can't. So I want to read a couple more parts of this chapter before I open up for Q&A. So this next part of this chapter, he talks about something called the Serenity Prayer, which is something that recovering addicts, learn when they're going through recovery. And it says, the prayer is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And then he says, this is how people going through addiction focus their efforts, or going through recovery from addiction. It's a lot easier to fight the addiction when you aren't also fighting the fact that you were born, that your parents were monsters, or that you lost everything. That stuff is already done. It's delivered. It's 0 in 100 chance that you can change it now. So what if you focused on what you can change? That's where you can make a difference. So what is up to you? Your emotions, your judgments, your creativity, your attitude, your perspective, your desires, your decisions, and your determination. This is our playing field, so to speak. Everything here is fair game. What is not up to us? Well, pretty much everything else. The weather, the economy, the circumstances, other people's emotions or judgments, trends, disasters, etc. Then the last bit of this chapter, he says, focusing exclusively on what is in our power magnifies and enhances our power, but every ounce of energy directed at the things we can't actually influence is wasted, self-indulgent, and self-destructive. All right, so that's what I want to open up tonight with. Not trying to be super heavy, but hopefully to be encouraging and around with everything that's going on right now. You likely have lots of questions. You might be concerned. You might be very nervous. You could be very scared. But what I want to focus on is less about the stuff that we can't control, that's out of our control, and more about what we can control. So to set up our call with that framework, I'm going to open Q&A and then also go through some questions that we got submitted earlier. The last thing I'll do to sort of open up this section, to maybe set the mood, is a quote that I love from Michael J. Fox, who has Parkinson's. If you aren't familiar with Michael J. Fox or the disease that he has. So he has a quote where he says, I have no choice about whether or not I have Parkinson's. I have nothing but choices about how to react to it. In those choices, there's freedom to do a lot of things in areas that I wouldn't have otherwise found myself in. All right. So that's the framework. That's the mindset. That's kind of where I want us to play. All right. That being said, what are your questions? We can talk budgeting. We can talk finance. We can talk investing. We can talk stock market. We can talk whatever you guys want to talk about. I do want to let you know that I was playing around with a lot of this tech before the call. So this is my first time doing YouTube Live, by the way. And turns out that YouTube, it's not super easy to share your screen, and there's a little bit more to it. And so I need to download some other software and do some fancy stuff to be able to share my screen. So if you have a very, very, very detailed YNAB specific question, A, feel free to email me, nick@mapped-out-money.com. B, if we have enough of these, what we might do is let me get this software worked out, and then we can do another live stream like this later this week, where I can actually share my screen and take like super detailed YNAB questions. But so that aside, email us if you have any of those.
Also, one quick thing, just so that everybody knows, I'm kind of monitoring the chat, and I'll pull questions out and put them in a list for Nick. So when you put a question in there, we see it, I'm adding it to the list.
Perfect. All right. So where are we at so far? Because I was thinking we might go back and forth between email and live. That's why
Okay.
the live's down here.
Oh, okay. Down there.
If you have any so far.
Okay.
All right, cool. All right, so I got a good question that I'm going to open us up with, and then we'll take some from the live as well. This one was emailed. I'm not going to ever share any personal information, but I like to share first names because it's vague, but it also feels like, oh, okay, cool. So this is a question from Valerie, and she says, I was poised to buy an electric car, but I put the brakes on, so to speak, when the stock market started falling. She still works part-time, and although she's mostly retired, her car is still drivable. The person she was going to sell the car to is not driving as much anymore and still has a car that can get around. The question is, even if you budgeted and saved for something, might this be a good time to save that money as a hedge against future lost income and a radically changed budget moving forward? And the answer is yes. Okay. So, if you've been saving a bunch of money for something, whether it's a car, whether it's a specific trip, whether it's a home renovation, whether it's a new backpack, if you haven't spent the money already, right now, right this second, I would probably hold off. Okay. I would probably wait this thing out a little bit longer, see what's going to happen. Um, any cash that you have on hand, whenever the stock market is sort of falling, and this is sort of a unique situation because not only has the stock market taken a massive dip, um, most of us can't really leave our homes. And so this is an even weirder situation than we faced in the past. That is really kind of new and unprecedented for this time that we're living through. So yes, long story short, if you've saved up any money for something but you haven't yet bought it, I would probably hold off, hang on to that cash, see what happens over the course of certainly the next few weeks, but really potentially even the next few months, to kind of see what's going on here. Anything that we can do to hedge against future income loss is a win in this scenario. All right, what question do you have? Okay, so let's see. Cassandra says, I did my fair share of panic buying and got really far behind in my YNAB transactions. What's your advice for catching up? So this is a great question. If you haven't, if you don't know what YNAB is, by the way, that's YNAB. I'd be fairly surprised if you're watching this and you don't know what YNAB is, since most of our videos that have done well on YouTube are about that. But basically, if you've done a whole bunch of stuff over the last few weeks and have gotten really far behind on your transactions, what are your options? Option one is just to say, forget it, and do what's called a reconciliation balance adjustment. Okay. I have a whole video on this, on how to reconcile your account. We can drop it into the chat here. I'll get it pulled up. I would just do a reconciliation balance adjustment on the account, make the account balance match whatever it is today, and then move on with your life. All right, so that's option one. That's easy option. Option two, take the extra time that you might now have on your hands because you're not going out, and sit down with your bank statement and your credit card statement and go line by line and enter everything manually. That's what Nick True would probably do because I'm super type A, and that stuff bothers me. But if that's not you, then that's fine. Option three, of course, is if it was really, really, really bad, like it was crazy behind, I would do a fresh start. I would make a fresh start in YNAB and just start over, which is important to recognize. Like, when you're starting over in YNAB, you still get to use all your same categories and stuff. You're just starting over with transactions. All right, so let me find this video here. And then we got an emailed question that was very similar to this. So I'm going to go ahead and answer that one as well.
What's up, guy?
All right. Let me drop this in. Okay, so I'm dropping a video into the chat right now about reconciling your accounts in YNAB. Okay. Awesome. So another question that sort of was similar to this from Renee was, I would like to know what to do if we fall way behind in YNAB. Is it better to plow through it everything is a little overwhelming. If you're way behind, seriously, just do a fresh start. There's no shame in that. Hannah and I did multiple fresh starts, especially in our first year or two of YNAB. So zero shame at all. Please feel free to do a fresh start. That's no big deal. All right. What's up?
We had a question. Would you pause debt payoff as well?
Pause debt payoff. I would pause accelerated debt payoff right now. So please make your minimum payments. Don't miss a payment. That's going to do nothing but hurt you long term. But if you're throwing if you're in throwing a lot of money at debt and sort of scrounging around and getting every extra dollar you can to try and accelerate your debt pay down, I'd probably pull back the reins a little bit and hoard some cash again, at least for a little bit. Now, let me couch that recommendation. This does depend on your job. Okay. If you're in a job that sells leisure products or hobby products, meaning you sell things, your company sells things that people purchase that are not necessities. Okay. Then you have a higher chance of having, getting potentially laid off or having issues in this time period. That's just a fact. My dad, for example, is a big car enthusiast. Okay. He loves cars. He likes working on cars, rebuilding cars. People who are car hobbyists don't spend as much money during recessions. Okay. It's just how it is. So if you're in the business of manufacturing like old school car parts and selling them to car hobbyist enthusiasts, recessions are tough for you. If you work for Amazon, okay, if you work for Walmart, if you work for Instacart or any of these delivery companies right now, and you're doing well, you can probably afford to throw a little bit more money at your debt still because you're not as concerned for job instability. So I always want to couch that sort of with it depends on your job and how stable or unstable your job is. But in general, I pull back the reins on accelerated debt pay down, have more cash in case you lose your income.
This question that Kelly emailed in also fits in.
Okay. So Kelly said, so if we still have quite a bit of debt and our real estate income goes up and down frequently, now more than ever expected with the quarantine, should we be more focused on making our minimum credit card payments while aging our money longer to ride out this craziness, or should we still be focused on getting rid of the credit card debt ASAP? So again, same basic answer. I would focus on, if you're using YNAB, the concept of aging your money, right? So we want to get that age of money long so that we have months worth of income. Hannah and I keep a 3-month buffer in our business where our business income pays for expenses that are 3 months from now. That gives us a lot of stability, even though income is up and down. Guess what? My income's down right now. Like income for March is down right now. YouTube ads, which is how we make up some of our money, is down. Other things are down. That's what happens during this time for us. But we're prepared for it because we have money set aside for future months and can still pay our expenses. Same kind of thing here. If you're throwing a lot of money at your credit card debt or anything like that, I'd pull back just a little bit, focus on aging your money, because if it does happen where you lose income, you're gonna really want that cash. All right. What one?
I just said, do you want one?
Yeah. Let's do this. So let's see. Hawkeye Farm says, how do you deal with allocation in your portfolio? Vanguard has a great study that shows time-based versus percentage deviations, but what do you think? PSA, just a reminder to have people double check their high yield savings accounts with multiple Fed rate cuts. Wealthfront is down to 0.26, but Ally still at 1.5. We'll see how long this lasts. Yes. So let me talk about the second thing first, and then I'll go back to the asset allocation. So very quickly on savings accounts, if you've got a decent chunk of money in savings, now's a good time to be paying attention to your savings accounts. I use Ally personally. That's just what we've been using for years. And like they said, they're at 1.5% right now, which is super fun that it's still there. It probably won't be for long because the Fed has continued to cut rates. So that is what happens. I personally would pay attention to this, but I wouldn't go change banks this week, because there's a good shot with everything still in flux, that you could go through all the headache of changing banks, only for that new bank to then cut its rate next week. So with everything just still being kind of crazy, I just don't want to waste time. I want to spend my time on the most high value efforts possible. Now, if you have a ton of money sitting in savings accounts, tens of thousands of dollars, and that 1.5 versus point half a percent, or 1.5 versus half a percent makes a big difference, then sure, focus on changing a little bit. But for most people, it's not going to be a high value decision for your time. But do pay attention and see what's going on. Okay, let me answer the first question on asset allocation. So let me go back here and read that. How do you deal with allocation in portfolio? Vanguard has a great study that shows time-based versus percentage deviation. What do you think? Me personally, I tend to be more on the percentage deviation side. There's good arguments for both ways, but that's just me personally. Now, for those people who don't know what we're talking about, it has to do with how you've got your money invested. Okay, so if it is no mistake, if you know our stuff at all, I don't buy individual stocks. You know that I don't day trade. I buy long term, broadly diversified index funds, largely off the back of the strategy of a book called The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins and a book called The Boglehead's Guide to Investing. If you are looking to invest, both of those books, I cannot recommend more. A subset of that is this idea around how your portfolio is broken up and what percentage do you have in large company stock versus small company stock versus growth company stock versus value company stock versus bonds. And there's lots of arguments about the percentage breakdown. I tend to lean towards rebalancing your portfolio based on getting outside of a certain percentage band versus on a certain time schedule. But that's just me, and that has to do with my risk tolerance. If you want more information, definitely check out the Boglehead's Guide to Investing. Also, my favorite resource on the internet for learning this kind of stuff and just hanging out in conversation is the Boglehead Forum. Okay. I spent crazy amounts of time on the Boglehead Forum when I was first. I mean, I still get on there regularly, but I spent crazy amounts of time on there for a few years, 5 or 6, 7 years ago, and just gained a wealth of information from the folks over there. Really, really good people. So, okay.
There was one we need to circle back to.
Yeah.
From Amy.
So Amy says, what about all those with student loans that the government has paused for now? Still make payments or save it all? Amy, so I could be wrong on this. Can you Google and just Google real quick? I could be wrong on this, but it's my understanding that the government hasn't paused loan payments, that they've only paused interest accumulation. Okay. So definitely be clear on that because I think that you still have to make your loan payment. I could be wrong, but I think that's the case. So definitely fact check me on that one. And if that's the case, you need to make that payment. Okay. Now, as far as interest accumulation, that's going to be a tricky. I've been in a few Facebook groups over the past week with some really smart people talking about how this might play out, and it's going to be tricky to figure out how they're going to calculate it and how they're actually going to track this. In my opinion, I would be careful not to do anything that could damage you long term. So if you can afford to continue making your minimum student loan payment, that's probably where I'm going to be at. Now, hold on. On Friday, President Trump announced that all federal student loan borrowers now have the option to suspend their monthly payments for at least the next 60 days. However, borrowers will still need to contact their student loan service requirement for forbearance. It's not okay. Okay, so it sounds like there's a possibility that you might be able to suspend your payments. I know they've been talking about that with mortgage. God, this is a nuanced question. Everything in personal finance is nuanced. Let me give you a couple of rule of thumbs for how I would think through this situation. Thing number one, especially right now, I'm going to circle back to what I said a few minutes ago. Depending on your job stability, your income changes the way that we answer a lot of these questions right now. If you're in a very stable job, that's a different answer than if people are getting laid off left and right now at your work, and it looks like you might be next. Okay. That's the two ends of the spectrum, right? And then we're all probably somewhere in between. Um, if you're closer to that instability side, yeah, I might lean towards if you have the option to suspend your monthly student loan payment and it looks like there's a good chance that you're could lose your job, I would I would call my student loan. Um, yeah, because you got to call the student loan servicer and make sure that you don't go into forbearance and look at suspending those payments. Okay. If you're on the other end, right, and your job is very stable and it doesn't look like that's going to be the worry for you right now, I would probably try to do my best to continue paying those things just so that we don't get ourselves into a worse hole down the road. Last thing, if you decide to pursue the route of suspending your student loan payments, you need to check a couple of things. One, you need to, I mean, seriously, do your homework and make sure that you're not going to get eaten alive with interest accumulation during this period. If that's the case, I'm really not a big fan of that. Number two, like I said, you definitely need to call your student loan company and look at the forbearance issue. Again, when it comes to the legislation and stuff, our president and the rest of the people in the White House and in Washington right now are saying and throwing out a ton of potential options, actual legislation that's getting approved. Um, there's a lot of things going on right now. So what I would tell you is to try not to make any quick or rash decisions around any single piece of information that you hear. Um, and instead pay very close attention to what actually gets passed and what that means. Oftentimes, when it comes to legislation, especially like financial legislation, big sweeping things like this, it can sound very simple on the surface, but it can have long lasting impacts as something like this actually trickles down into how it works out for the everyday person like you and me. So just do your research on this kind of stuff and really make sure you're doing your due diligence.
I think you touched on something really important too, as far as like, right now everybody's bogged down in dealing with the situation, the
Yep.
crisis. But Jocko talks about that whole concept of detaching and kind of taking yourself out of what's going on, like
Yep.
right here in the here and now, and make sure that you're not putting yourself in a bad situation after this crisis
That's right.
has passed.
That's right.
So I thought you touched on that. And that was something good to emphasize.
Yes, that's something I'm actually going to get to here in a few minutes too. I'm going to take kind of a break halfway through maybe and talk about another concept that I want us all focused on. And part of that concept is we need to do everything we can now to obviously mitigate against something really bad happening, but also we need to look at what we can do now to set us up for as much success on the back end of this whole thing, right? Because at some point, life will go back to normal. It might be in 3 weeks, it might be in 3 years, it might be in 10 years. Okay, we don't know. I was listening to a video today with a guy who's talking about how one of the crises in I guess it would have been around 1929, where it took over a decade for things to really get back to normal. So I don't know. Is it going to be back to normal in 2 weeks? Is it going to be back to normal in a few years? Is it going to be back to normal in a decade? I don't know. But what I do know is that going back to sort of this piece, right, focusing on what we can and can't control, we want to do everything we can to take what we can control and set us up for as much success on the backside. Um, Let me touch on one other quick investing question that we had emailed in. So Schooner says, I'm wondering if one were to take even a little spare cash, maybe even $100, and purchase some stock now, how would you go about doing so? Not day trading, but taking some advantage of the current super low prices. And I know you won't be able to recommend certain stocks, but I could guess. And they basically just said, like, I know you can't recommend specific stocks, but any ideas? Okay, so I'm going to lean on a couple things. Number one, again, check out the books I recommend. Go on audiobook if you don't like reading. Simple Path to Wealth, Boglehead's Guide to Investing. I don't buy individual stocks. I don't do it. I own one individual stock that I bought as a joke 2 years ago in a Robinhood account. Okay, I paid $150 for it, and my friend and I, it's almost more of a It's almost more like just for the fun of like us being able to laugh at it because it just goes up and down all the time. And every now and again, he texts me and he's like, "Hey, how's that one stock doing?" And about one share of it, and it's a funny game. That's how I do individual stocks. Okay, I don't buy individual stocks. Here's part of the problem. Okay, whether it's the cruise industry, the airline industry, or whoever it is that everybody's talking about right now, going like, "Oh, it's got to come back. It's tanked." I saw a joke made in a group yesterday where, "Hey, what are you guys going to do with the stimulus checks that you get?" I'm thinking about buying 8% of a cruise company, right? Making the joke of that's how low it's gone down. That the single stimulus check from the government would get them an 8% stake in the company. Um, Here's the problem with that. Use 2008 as an example. Okay, we need to learn from history. Some car manufacturers went out of business, but you don't know which ones. Okay. Ford's still around, GM's still around, but there are other companies that don't make cars anymore. So is it going to be Norwegian? Is it going to be Royal Caribbean? Is it going to be Carnival? Is it going to be Disney's cruise line? Uh, I don't know. And unless you truly know, I'm not a big fan of gambling with individual stocks. Unless you literally like see it as gambling and you're like, I'm cool to blow $100 to like have a fun experiment. That's fine. Um, but with real money, I'm not a big fan of that. Now, let me answer the question directly. If you really did want to do this and you were like, I don't care, I still want to go do this, you can use an app called Robinhood. You can use an app called Webull. Those are both two apps that do this. Be careful with both of them with the amount of money that you use. If you pay any attention to their news, Robinhood has recently had a crazy fiasco with locking up trading. And so if you're investing big money, go use a go use somebody that's been around for a long time. Okay, live question. So Misty says, with refunds from now canceled trips showing up as credits on the credit card, is it better for budgeting purposes to leave them as a credit statement or request the refund check? Good question. So that's a great question. There's a lot of credit card companies. I'm not sure that a lot of credit card companies, it depends on how your credit card company would work. Number one, I don't know that the credit cards I've used would like cut me a check for that, would actually send me a check in the mail. If they would, I'd be probably tempted to take it just from the standpoint of anytime I can get, like I do this with cash back, for example. I almost view this as cash back. I always take the check and then deposit the check to my account. And then that way I have brand new money in my account and then I can try and decide, okay, what do I want to use this money for? Do I want to use it to pay down debt? Do I want to use it to invest? Do I want to use this money to increase my emergency fund? Do I want to save for something specific? That's the way I like to do it. So if you can get the money cash wise, I'd probably take the money, put it in my checking account, and then decide, great, I have X amount of dollars. What do I want to do with it? And then if you decide to use it to pay down credit card debt, great, that's awesome. All right. One more. Let's do one more live. Okay. Renee says, my savings money gets pulled into my to be budgeted, although I don't want to have it included. How can I fix this? Renee, I'm going to drop another video here in the chat. So I did a whole video, if you haven't seen it yet, on YNAB savings accounts and the way that they're handled. They are one of the trickiest parts of YNAB. So I highly recommend highly recommend checking that out. Here you go. So I dropped that into the chat. That's the savings video. I actually like having savings account money get pulled into to be budgeted because I keep it on budget. I have a separate group of categories that represent my savings account, and then I allocate the money to that account. Let's take a look at that. All right, let me do one more question from emails. All right, so Valerie says, do you make a separate YNAB category for extra groceries that you've purchased due to the coronavirus? No, I didn't. If you want to track any extra money that you're spending because of COVID-19, then you can definitely create a category for that. It's kind of a personal preference. I haven't personally done it. Hannah and I, our grocery budget has just been more expensive this month, and our household items have just been more expensive this month because of we've had to buy more. Um, for us, it's particularly interesting because we have a very small refrigerator and also a very small storage space, so we literally can't stock up on that much, even if we wanted to. But it hasn't. We've gotten a little bit more than normal, but um, yeah, we're just gonna have a larger groceries expense this month for me. But if you
But
wanted
at
to
the end of
track
the
it,
day,
you
it's
could.
still groceries,
Yeah,
so
it's
we're
all
not really
groceries.
worried
I'm
about.
not too worried about it
Yeah.
overall. Um, okay. What do we have one more live? All right. So Jerry says, "What are you doing differently now than before the pandemic? In most cases, it's time when you double down. Uh, however, with the lockdown in my industry, it's been a bit of an obstacle, considering that we sell real estate." Yes. Um, that's actually a perfect transition into what I wanted to talk about, anyways. Kind of in the middle of this call. So, let me answer the question directly, and then let me transition into that. I think that'll be a really, really good, really good transition moment. So, um, I think this is an important question that everybody should be asking. What opportunities exist now that didn't exist just a few weeks ago or just a few months ago? And specifically, what Hannah and I are doing different, I'll share. I'll share just a minute because we wrote down a whole list of things that we're focused on that are different. Um, But it is difficult for some industries, right? If you're selling real estate right this second, like literally right this second, it's kind of hard, right? You can't do your open house visits. You can't take clients around. You can't there's a lot of things that you're used to doing to sell real estate that you can now no longer do. I think that we're going to see a massive increase in technology. Depending on how long this lasts, we're going to see a big increase in like VR tech over the next few months and a big increase in remote stuff. So I think that if I was in the real estate industry and I thought this was going to last a decent while, I'd be probably doing everything I could to get my hands on a drone, some VR, like stuff like that, to try and really look at um, mm, being able to record and put some homes that I'm trying to sell up online
Virtual
and do
tours and
virtual
stuff.
tours and things like that. Here's the thing: the market right this second, yeah, people probably aren't buying homes like crazy, and there will be some fluctuation, but people will always buy homes because, especially during a crisis like this, some people are going to need to sell their homes, and there's going to be buyers who want to buy those. I was listening to a podcast last week, and they were talking about how the greatest transfers of wealth happen during crises. And one example they gave was the Kings Ranch down in Texas, which is the largest, I believe, the largest single private property in the U.S. And it gobbled up a bunch of property and bought a bunch of property three different times. Obviously, it's done it over the years, but three major times in history. One was the Civil War, one was the Great Depression, and the other was World War II. And there's a lot of other examples. So if I was in real estate, I'd be looking at how I can do things online. Okay, let
Here's a good
me.
question that kind of comes into that too.
Okay, cool. Tony says, "I'm a tech worker and my job income has been relatively unaffected by recent events. What spending behaviors should I adopt to do my part and help my community?" Tony, that's a great question. So if you've been relatively unaffected, which I would say that Hannah and I haven't been totally unaffected, but good grief, we've been very ineffective compared to a lot of people. We don't have kids, so kids aren't home at school, home from school right now. We already work remotely in a camper. We don't have a mortgage. There's a lot of things that Hannah and I, relatively speaking, our life is stayed pretty much the same. We can't go out as much, um, and we're slowing down our travels. So I'm similar to you in that vein. Um, a couple thoughts. Number one would be Hannah and I are also focused on reducing spending, in part because if our income does potentially go down, but also because I want to increase our savings so that we can set us up for success getting out of this, right? So that means for us, saving money to potentially use towards a down payment on a rental property later this year. It also means putting some more money into the stock market. So personally, what I would do if I was you and I remained relatively unchanged is I would try to reduce spending so that I could increase savings and use this as an opportunity to get stocks at lower prices. Or if you're interested in real estate, go that route. If you're looking to help the community and you've remained relatively unchanged, I think one of the best things you can do is to try and figure out ways to support your small businesses. Hannah and I are currently in a small town in Southern Alabama right now, and that we really love. And it's been really kind of sad to see. We don't even live here, but we've come here enough that we feel like we could live here. And it's been sad to see, the local coffee shops or the local artisans or the local craft makers. They had to cancel a big crafting event that was happening or going to happen, and that was one that a bunch of artisans, you know, that they make their livelihood on that, right? And that's tough. So if you're in a position to buy gift cards to your favorite restaurants, to buy stuff online as stores try to pivot and figure out how to do online things. If you're in tech, I've actually seen some of my friends who are in like Facebook advertising and in website building. I've actually seen some of them donating their time to local businesses to help them get their websites online, get them robust, get them in the 21st century. If you have those skills, like, oh my goodness, I think that would be I would look at doing something like that, especially if you want to give back to your local community. I mean, there's other ways too. My mind, obviously, as a business owner, my heart goes out for a lot of the small business owners. So that's kind of where my first answer went. But obviously, there's a lot of other ways that you can help from a health perspective as well.
I think that's really far reaching too, because a lot of those local businesses, I mean, donate to, local nonprofits
Yep.
too. So anything from like food kitchens to, whatever else is going on in the community. So even just like school functions and stuff. So, we need those small businesses in our community.
Totally.
And if we can help them out right now,
that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a perfect transition to what I want to talk about a little bit in the middle of this call. I'm going to read another section from Obstacle is the Way. If you can't tell, I think you should go get this book. It's a short read too. Like it's really quick and choppy. Okay, so this section is from a chapter called Seize the Offensive. All right. And it's from page 119. The quote that I want to start off with is from E.H. Chapin. And it says, "The best men are not those who have waited for chances, but who have taken them, besieged chance, conquered the chance, and made chance their servitor." Okay. And then here's the section I want to read. "If you think it's simply enough to take advantage of opportunities that arise in your life, you will fall short of greatness. Anyone sentient can do that. What you must do is learn how to press forward precisely when everyone else around you sees disaster. It's at the seemingly bad moments, when people least expect it, that we can act swiftly and unexpectedly to pull off a big victory. While others are arrested by discouragement, we are not. We see the moment differently and act accordingly. A crisis provides the opportunity for us to do things that we could not do before." All right, and then one more bit from the same chapter. Okay, here it is. This is a section where he's talking about Napoleon in particular. So he says, Napoleon described war in simple terms. Two armies are two bodies that clash and attempt to frighten each other. At impact, there is a moment of panic, and it is in that moment that the superior commander turns to his advantage. Great commanders look for decision points, for it is the burst of energy directed at decisive points that break things wide open. In many battles, as in life, the two opposing forces will often reach a point of mutual exhaustion. It's the one who rises the next morning after a long day of fighting and rallying, instead of retreating, the one who says, "I intend to attack and whip them right here and now." That is the commander who will carry victory home intelligently. Okay. What's the purpose of that section? The purpose is to ask the question, what opportunities exist now that didn't exist a few months ago? And how can we go on the offensive to use this opportunity to the best of our abilities based on, again, what we talked about at the beginning of the call, what we can control. How do I mean? Well, first, let me put a disclaimer out here. By no means, by absolutely no means, am I asking you or telling you to take advantage of what's going on right now. Okay. Don't go buy a bunch of Purell bottles and try to sell them at exorbitant rates. Okay. That's just being a jerk. That's not, that's not what you're trying, that's not at all what I'm saying. But there is a difference. I saw a good tweet yesterday there from a friend, Brian Harris, who said there's a difference between making money during a crisis and making money from a crisis. We're not trying to make money from a crisis. What we are trying to do is take the offensive attitude instead of the defensive attitude. Here's a few things that Hannah and I wrote down over the weekend as we talked through this for us. Personally, we're planning to cut some of our expenses so that we can double down on savings so that we can ramp up the amount of money we have for a down payment and buy a rental property sooner rather than later. Getting into rental real estate is something we've talked about for a long time, but it's something that we are wanting to do more of, and it's something that right now seems like, man, if this plays out like it did 10 years ago, real estate is going to be an amazing buy, and we would like to have the money available to do that. So for us, that means traveling slower since gas is one of our big expenses, assuming, of course, that lockdowns and things like that get removed, because right now we're not going anywhere. Only staying in parks that we have memberships to reduce our expenses. Choosing locations that have free activities, right? For us, that means for you guys, practically speaking, this is just less eating out in general and doing more free activities. Hopefully, when we can all start coming out of our homes a little more, focusing more on hiking and going outside, going to the park rather than going to the brewery or the coffee shop or the restaurant. For us, this also means taking some serious meal planning into account. The other thing we're doing to go on the offensive is using this extra time that we aren't spent traveling as much to double down on education. So we are going through a real estate investing course right now. I'm also about to pick up a book from a company called Bigger Pockets, all about real estate investing. I read one a couple months ago. I'm going to read another one now, specifically on rental properties. So we're doubling down on our learning. Also, depending on cash flow, if we are able to find ways to continue and grow our business during this time, we're not going to pay ourselves as much. We're not going to increase salary. We're going to shift more money into investments, like in the stock market, like we talked about earlier. So for us, it's learning, it's productivity, trying to use this time to get more efficient in our work. And then trying to, the last thing that we're doing to go on the offensive is use this as a catalyst to take good care of our health, try and get on a much better regular workout routine and sleeping routine. Okay, I saw a question down here about resources, kind of while we're on the topic.
Yeah, for real estate, which I dropped a link to Paula's
Okay,
stuff
cool.
in there, but Paula also has a lot of free resources.
Yes. So Paula Pant is somebody that I've personally followed for years. I found her website in 2014. Her website is called Afford Anything, and she is just very, very, very smart. Has a lot of rental properties. She has a course on rental properties, but all of her free stuff is fantastic. So read her free stuff on her website. Bigger Pockets is another great resource that I I love. I'm also friends with a handful of people that work at Bigger Pockets, so I feel personally comfortable vouching for the work that they put out and what they do. And I'm a big fan of their books, their resources, their forums, the website in general, and the podcast in general. So big fan of that. The last one I would share that I'm really a big fan of would be a guy named Chad Carson. Chad Carson, his website is coachcarson.com, I think, or coachchadcarson.com, something like that. He is from the South Carolina area, and he owns a bunch of property near Clemson. and has really built a great real estate portfolio over there, has a book about it, is really, really solid, and I've learned a lot from him. As far as deciding on rental properties versus REITs, yeah, you can definitely go that route. So, for those who aren't familiar, a REIT is basically, in layman's terms, it's a similar way to invest in real estate without actually owning real estate yourself, meaning having to go and buy properties and manage it and do all that stuff, right? You can actually buy REITs through Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab, right? And they look almost like mutual funds, but they are a similar to the exposure. It's similar exposure in terms of if you're wanting to expose your investments to the real estate industry, that's a really easy way to do it. Here's the personal answer. I personally, this is maybe a mixture of confidence and also um, nerdiness and interest. um, I feel like Hannah and I, and our intensity and drive and will to learn, um, can use our strengths to learn about real estate, invest in real estate on our own, manage and set up a team on our own, and do better and have more control over the outcome than if I invest more passively in a REIT. So I'm a big fan of passive investing in the stock market. I don't have the interest or the time or the bandwidth to invest what's needed to be able to day trade effectively or something like that over there. I also think that it's much more difficult to do because especially because of the way that robots now are so involved in trading. Whereas in real estate, I feel like I can use my strengths and learn, and then use my sort of entrepreneurial strengths to have more control over the deal, have more control over the outcome, and ultimately perform better. And then lastly, I'm also interested in it. Like I'm very interested and fascinated and want to learn more about it, which has a big play and should have a big play in any direction you choose. If you have a passion or interest for something. All right. So hopefully that conversation on the offense is helpful for you guys. I really want you to make a lot of. I really want you to think that through. Okay. I really want you to think through this idea of how can we change our mindset to be less defensive, more offensive? What opportunities can we take to see ourselves better when this is all said and done? Kyle says, you mentioned setting aside money for investing. Are you dollar cost averaging? And at this point, are you waiting because you're trying not to catch a falling knife? Okay. So, fantastic question. Number one, when I was saying setting aside money for investing, I was talking about setting aside money for investing in real estate. With that money, I'm not putting it in the market at all. We're keeping it in an Ally savings account, and then when we're ready, we will invest. For investments into the stock market, we're dollar cost averaging, and that's what I'm going to continue. That's what I'm going to recommend doing. That's what I'm going to continue to do. I'm not trying to time this market. I'm not trying to catch a falling knife. I'm not trying to pay attention to anything like that. You guys saw if you were trying to time stuff last week, it was impossible. We literally lost 10% one day and then went back up 10% another. Like it's crazy. It's crazy. So I'm always a big fan of, if you're not familiar with the term dollar cost averaging, the layman's terms idea, if you have money that you want to invest in real estate, don't put it all in, don't hoard it and try and time it and put it the right moment. Just as you get some money that you're ready, put a little bit in, put a little bit in, then the next week put some more, then the next week some more, then the next month some more, little bits at a time, over time, rather than hoarding a bunch of money and trying to find the perfect right moment when the market is at the bottom and then we'll come up. Because man, it would not be fun if you thought you were at the bottom and you're like, all right, I think we're at the bottom. I'm going to invest tomorrow. And then 2 seconds after the opening bell, we're up 7%. That happened. Okay. That happened last week. So not a big fan of trying to time it. If you have money, you're ready to invest in the market, set it aside in small chunks and then dollar cost average into it.
Links to resources that we mentioned in this, what's the best way to get those out? Will that be email?
Okay. The best way to get links to resources will be, I think once this is all said and done, YouTube will have the video up. I'm just going to edit the description of this call and put a link right there. I think I can also leave a comment once the video is done with links. So let's, are we taking notes on all the resources?
Yeah, I'll get them.
Okay. So we'll drop links to this call or links to resources on this page in the description and in a comment once this call is all said and done. So just come back to the channel, later tonight or something after this ends, and we'll have them there for you. Cool. So let's go to the next question.
Nicole has a question that we've kind of maybe danced around, but just to answer it flat out.
COVID-19 does not affect my income, but if the recession lasts into 2021, I might be affected. How would you use this time to prepare for the fact that the economy may not bounce back quickly? Emergency fund. That's how we do it. Okay. So seriously, like, you've heard the terms emergency fund. You've heard like 3 to 6 months emergency fund. The reason we say 3 to 6 month emergency fund is for income loss. If you watch my YNAB videos, if you use YNAB, you know that I'm a fan of having categories in your budget for car maintenance, house maintenance, kid, breaking their arm, medical stuff, pet stuff. Hannah and I don't touch our emergency money for car issues, pet issues, medical issues. Okay. That's budgeted for. We're saving monthly for that stuff. The emergency fund is for income loss. So what I would do is, if you're not that affected right now, this is the time to be doing two things. Number one, building your cash reserve, getting ahead, breaking that paycheck to paycheck cycle, building the emergency money. And then number two, doing the offensive stuff like we talked about just a few minutes ago. All right. Cool. I just want to make sure we have, y'all give me like 1 second. Just want to make sure we've got like resources somewhere. We're tracking.
I'll get them all together.
Okay, cool. So, all right. Look up here. That was the wrong Notion thing. Okay, here we go. All right. Next question. Here we go. I got it.
Okay.
As someone who's starting, so this is NBCRULZ. As someone who's staring down the barrel of redundancy, the thought of starting budgeting is overwhelming but needed. What is the best way in YNAB to start, and what is the most important thing to focus on? All right. So if you have not started a budget, if you're looking at starting a budget and you want to use YNAB, which is obviously the tool that I've got a bunch of videos about, first thing to do would be to watch my beginner's guide video. Okay. That video will take you step by step into setting everything up. Second thing to do is to keep this phrase in mind. Simplicity is better for now. Simplicity is better for now. When you're starting out in YNAB, I want you to keep it as simple as possible. Here's some examples of what I mean. If you buy stuff on Amazon, okay, that could be entertainment, could be groceries, could be cosmetics, could be pet stuff, could be household items, could be all kinds of stuff, right? With this crisis, if we're all stuck at home, Amazon might start selling who knows what. Just create an Amazon category. Don't even try and overcomplicate it and figure out where all your expenses are coming in or going. So here's the bottom line. Try to make this as simple as humanly possible, as few categories as possible, as few accounts as possible, and just get into the habit of using it. Focus on getting the habit of using it regularly than anything else. I would tell you to block out a couple of hours when you first sit down to really get after it. Watch my starter video, maybe watch another couple other videos, get everything set up, and then focus on taking 15 to 20 minutes once a day for the next couple of weeks. If you can do that and just do a few minutes a day after your first big session, it's going to start not to feel nearly as scary. The last thing I would tell you here on this getting started with YNAB piece is don't try to budget at first. Okay. Create what I call, or what we always say, like a tracking account or a tracking budget, meaning you're just trying to pay attention to what's going on. Okay. You're just trying to get the ins and the outs categorized correctly. You're not actually actively budgeting money. Okay. I'm not worried about you budgeting money right now. I am worried about you just getting something going. Let me know if you have more questions on that.
So another question that leads into that, Nick. Well, kind of related to Nicole's question.
Oh,
Right there.
Anastasia. Okay. Long term, my husband and I have tightened our budget, cut down on non essentials. What is the best tip to set up for normal life in 6 months when the stock market potentially comes back or when it comes back? Okay, so we've tightened our budget, cut down on non essentials, but what's the best tip for set up our normal life in 6 months? That's a great question. As an aside to that, before I answer it, you might find that if you cut back on normal expenses, I think one benefit, if there is such a thing to a benefit of what's going on right now, I think one benefit is that with us all at home a little more and being forced to spend a little less, I think you might find that you actually don't need to spend as much money to maintain your certain level of happiness, and the happiness doesn't actually come from spending money. So that's sort of an interesting side note. Meaning, when the stock market comes back, you may find that you don't need to increase your spending again in order to be really happy with your life. That being said, what I sort of keep in mind, this is a little more advanced. Okay, so let me preface this. If you haven't started a budget or if you're new to budgeting, do what I just said in the last question. If you're like kind of know your stuff with your budget and you're ready to go, do this. Hannah and I sort of have two things in mind. We have this is the amount of money we need to spend every month in order to maintain our certain level of life without really feeling a pinch. Okay. For us, that hovers right around like that includes savings and everything. So that hovers around $4,000 a month for us. But that does include some savings goals and stuff. But basically, I need to see $4,000 come into our YNAB budget for us to be like cruising. Then we have a number that's like, if we need to cut, like if we need to reduce, we need to not go out, we need to cut back, we need to really tighten up, we need to see this much money come in, right? Which for us, it's going to be in a $2,500 probably to $3,000 range, somewhere in that range. Anything less than that, we're going to have to like start making drastic changes, right? A bunch of our fixed bills and stuff like that are now going to have to figure out how to get cut. So here's where I'm going. For you, Anastasia, I would have sort of two things in mind. When you cut back your spending and tighten the reins, what's the amount of money that you've newly freed up that you're now setting aside either for investing or for savings or for debt pay down? And then just sort of keep that in mind that when things bounce back and come back and life resumes itself, that in your mind, you don't want to increase your spending more than that amount that you dropped from. Like, I don't want you to all of a sudden, go crazy on the back end. So hopefully that answers your question. But I like having a couple numbers in mind. Here's our normal, like super fun, enjoyable life. And here's what we can really tighten up to. All right. Graydon says, how do you choose goals for variable expenses that could be $1,000 plus or could be less than $100? Yeah. So, I mean, a good example for something like that would be auto maintenance, right? Like you could have an oil change, or you could have a transmission go out, right? And those can be wildly different in expenses. For me, what I try to do is if there's at all potential for something to be and I say decent potential. If you have a brand new car, you probably don't need as big of an emergency, as big of an auto maintenance category as Hannah and I do for our truck. That's a 2001 with 250,000 miles on it. Okay. So for us, with auto maintenance, if our transmission goes out like it did 3 years ago or 2 years ago, that's $3,000. So what I do in this scenario is if you're using YNAB, they have a goal type called target category balance by date. Is what I will do is I'll say, okay, I'd like to have, at least whatever. And I would normally set that $1,000, $1,200. I'd set that amount, whatever that amount could potentially be. And then I would save little by little by little every month until we get to that amount. And eventually you'll have $1,200 set aside for this, expense. If you're not using YNAB, you could just use a separate savings account. I'd open a new savings account at your bank and then use it just for this. Set a little bit aside every month until you have that amount. And then when you have to have the $100 thing, well, then you just take $100 from that category. And then over the next few months, put another 20 bucks in there every month and then build it back up slowly. That's the way I handle that.
Got another question from Dave right here.
Okay. So Dave says, how often do you guys put together a net worth statement? I do it with my fiance quarterly. She thinks I'm crazy. She also thought YNAB was crazy when we started, but now loves it, saving more.
I thought it was crazy too when we started.
Yeah, Hannah thought it was crazy too. I don't actually pay a ton of attention to net worth, mostly because I think it can be a goofy metric. I need to do a video on this. Because I have strong opinions about it. Here's why. One, people calculate net worth in all sorts of different ways. Do you include the house? Do you not include the house? Do you include assets like cars? Do you not include them? If you have a really nice guitar that's worth a couple $1,000s, do you include that? As a general rule of thumb for net worth purposes, I only include things that I'm like willing to give up or change. So like for now, Hannah and I don't count this Airstream. We have this Airstream paid off. Okay. Super cool for us. We paid it off last year. We were really excited about it. We could sell this Airstream for pretty good money, but then we will be homeless. Okay. So I'm not going to include this in my net worth statement because I'm not willing to sell it right now. It's not on the table. So for us, when I look at our net worth, I'm really only paying attention to our investments and our liquid assets. As far as a net worth statement, I don't do anything super formal right now. We might later on as we get rental properties and have a lot more going on. Right now, stuff is very simple. We have a couple of retirement accounts and we have an Airstream. We don't own any property at this moment, so it's very simple for us. That being said, I look at our net worth about once a quarter. I try not to pay too much attention to it day to day or month to month.
Okay, here's a question from Emily.
Emily says, how do you decide what true expenses are in your different tiers? Are they generally a part of that bare minimum number? They're a part of the bare minimum number if something bad happened and it would affect everything else. Meaning, if something crazy happened to your car, do you have to have a car to get to work? Assuming we're not on lockdown and quarantine, okay? Assuming that, do you need a car to get to work? If not, if there's public transportation available in your area, if there's another alternative, then I probably wouldn't include the car in my like bare minimum number. But if I need the car because I have to have it to live my life, Hannah and I have to have a truck. We have to. Okay, it's what tows our home around. It's very important. So anything that's a true expense related to the truck, we've got to include in our sort of minimums. All right. Chad says, I just changed jobs. Oh man, that's tough, dude. I just changed jobs on March 2nd and in the middle of relocating California to Texas. A little concerned with all the uncertainty, but still moving forward for an April 7th close. Any pros or cons I'm not thinking of? Okay, so I'm going to start with the really bad one first. I've actually heard of this happening to one person in particular that's going on right now in this cycle. If there's potential that the new job could have some real bad instability, you just need a game plan for that. Let me tell you the quick story that I did here, not to freak anybody out, just something to be aware of somebody moving from New York to Oregon during this time for a new job, and then got laid off from the new job and was told that they did not qualify for unemployment because they had not been in Oregon long enough to qualify there and that they needed to actually get unemployment from New York. But because they quit their job in New York voluntarily and didn't get laid off, they didn't qualify for unemployment in New York either. So this person had a situation where because they had moved and were sort of in between and then got laid off from the new job, they weren't going to get any unemployment benefits, which is a really tough blow. And so a lot of that stuff varies state to state. A lot of that stuff varies job to job even. And so just make sure you at least understand sort of what your rights are and aren't. That would be my sort of precautionary thing. And then the last thing I would say to that point is everything else would be sort of similar to what we've said in this call before. So, like, if you aren't budgeting or tracking your money and know your expenses, fix that. You need to know your inflow and outflows. You have to know that stuff. Um, if there's any at all possibility that this new job could have some instability, you need to hedge against that by looking for ways that you can make other money, right? Maybe potentially starting a side hustle, trying to look for how you can use some skill sets online. You need to be able to hedge against that. Um, Third thing, when this new job starts off, well, it sounds like the job already started, but maybe the relocation hasn't started yet or is in the middle. I would I would do everything I possibly could, Chad, to be the like best possible employee ever at that new job. I would crush it. I would do literally everything to be like the person and just build your reputation there really, 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 really solidly, so that it reduces your chances of being the person to get laid off if it came to that. Again, focusing on what we can and can't control, right? What's within our control, how efficiently we work, how hard we work, how good of a job we do, and how we prepare. So that's what I would say. All right, we've got a couple more questions that I want to hit from.
Do you want to answer this one live from David? And
Okay, yeah, David. Okay, so let's see. We are retired on Social Security. We have an IRA also, and we just live on the Social Security for now. The IRA is what is in our emergency fund. Would you include the IRA in your budget as the emergency fund? That's interesting. So that sort of depends on a couple of things. So I'm going to be real careful to not touch that IRA right now. Depending on how it's invested, especially, it's probably lost a ton of its value over the past few weeks. So I would do everything we can to not touch it as emergency money. And in my opinion, I would try to reduce my expenses, even though your Social Security may not be a massive amount. I would try to reduce my expenses as much as possible to save cash for an emergency fund so that in the case that you need to get emergency money, you don't have to go to your investment account. This is actually a great transition to another question I've gotten a lot over the past few weeks, which is, hey, we should be investing right now, right? Like, what should we be doing? This circles back to what we said at the beginning of the call. Uh, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, or if you're in debt and you don't have a healthy emergency fund, I don't want you investing right now. Because if you invest a bunch of money thinking that like, oh, I'm going to take advantage of the low, I'm going to be able to, ride this up. Here's the problem. One, you don't know when it's going to come up. Two, you don't know if this is actually the low. And if you do lose your job, if you do have instability in income and you need to go dip into that, or you have an emergency and you need to go dip into that investment might be less because it was, a month from now. So, to sort of answer that question, David, and also the other question of investing, I would try my best to save cash for an emergency fund and build that up so that we don't have to touch the IRA. In general, with your IRA, if you're going to start pulling money at some point to live off of it, you want to time those withdrawals as best you can to when the market is up, not when it's down. And the way that we try to time that somewhat is by having a healthy amount of cash set aside. Okay. I'm going to answer a couple that were emailed in. So this one is sort of it's a little nuanced, but I think it hits on some of the worry that people are having, and so maybe I think it'll be helpful. What's happening in our world today is in some ways more of the same. This is from Carolyn, by the way. But overall planning is also a lot harder. My family has both a small business of our own. My husband is now laid off from one other, and we don't know for how long. It's making a plan that has worked 24 months more challenging. I guess I'm asking, is this the kind of thing we save for? Should we feel okay using our emergency fund? A part of me is so ingrained in YNAB that it crushes me to spend this money. I'm used to seeing it there. I don't know if that's concrete enough to be a real question. I guess it's really about changing mindset. How do we still use YNAB to the best of our advantage without beating yourself up that you aren't being as successful as you want to be because you just can't right now? This is a really good question. And it actually goes back to something Hannah and I dealt with 6 years ago when we first got married. So if you don't know that story, when Hannah and I first got married, we had saved right around $11,000 or $12,000, and then we got married, and we basically we spent around like I don't know 24 grand that year because I remember I was making around $900 to $1,000 a month as an working an internship. We were both in school, and then we were living off of the other like 12 grand we had saved. Okay, so we basically had enough money to get us through until I graduated college and got a real job. So, and that was the game plan. So the game plan was save money, have enough money to basically last us until Nick gets a real job, get married, use the money from the savings account, actively pull money from the savings account to live off of it. And then when Nick gets a real job, then we'll actually have enough money for our living. Well, when it came time to actually do that in the months after we got married, it was way more stressful than what we anticipated. It's one thing on paper to say, yes, our game plan is to pull money and watch the account balance go down, but that's okay. It's an entirely different thing to actually live it and watch the account balance go down. And that ended up being way more stressful, especially for me, than we initially thought. So one, I understand your pain if you are having to pull from emergency money right now. Okay. If somebody did get laid off in the home and you're needing to live off some money, here's what I would tell you. Number one, we want to reduce expenses to that bare minimum level. If this is you, if somebody just got laid off that you rely on their income, we need to reduce expenses to that bare minimum level. Number two, don't feel bad. If you have an emergency fund, don't feel bad pulling from it. That's what it's for. Emergency funds are for income loss. You should not feel bad for this. Number three, yes, there are time periods in your life, there are seasons in your life where you're not going to be as successful in your financial goals as you are in other times of your life. That's just life. And so, unfortunately, there are periods where that happens. And this is one of those periods where, depending on your situation, it may be a period where you're not going to be as successful financially as you were a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 5 years from now. So what I would tell you is to try and embrace that season and again focus on what you can and can't control. This is where you still brainstorm ways and opportunities that you do have. Sounds like in this particular person's case, the husband got laid off, but they have a small business that they run together in the family. This is where I would super lean into that business and try and do everything within my power to pivot if that's what needs to happen and make that business successful during this time.
Just expanding on what you said, you did that video about questioning
Yep.
everything. Like
Yep.
this is a time to question everything. What worked before may not work anymore.
That's right.
And that's okay. You can pivot and change and do something that you never thought about doing before.
That's right.
So I think that just not falling into our assumptions and how we're used to living life and the way that people around us are used to living life and really making decisions for ourselves and how we go about business and our finances and everything. So time to question everything.
That's right. That's right.
Got a question for you from Beth. Let's see.
Okay, so Beth says, what do you think about money in Stash and Acorns apps?
And then add Robinhood.
Okay. So I put Stash and Acorns in sort of a separate category than Robinhood. Let me explain. So typically with Stash and Acorns, depending on your settings and what you have them doing, they're pulling money automatically based on account balances, right? So if it feels like you got money in there, it just pulls it. Okay. I'm a control freak. Okay. So Nick True does not like those apps personally. Because I like to think about the money that I have in my account, what I want to do with it. And if I want to put it somewhere, I'll put it somewhere. And if I don't, I won't. But that's me. There are lots of people that love those apps because they will passively let them pull money. And then, whoa, all of a sudden I had a few $100s in there that I didn't, that there's no way I would have had otherwise. This is a self-awareness question first and foremost, of like knowing yourself, knowing how you react. Hey, Margot. Sort of how you deal with money and interact. So that's the Acorns and Stash thing. It's all self-awareness to me. If you feel like you need it and you will save more money with it than you would otherwise, by all means use them. If they're just going to be annoying in your budget because they're going to pull money that you previously had set aside for something else, which is what happens to me when I use them, and you're just going to get annoyed, then don't use them. Okay, now the second question of Robinhood, and then what you choose for Acorns and stuff as far as your investments. Again, this is going to be going back to the investment resources that I mentioned earlier. I'm a big fan of the Boglehead's Guide to Investing, the Simple Path to Wealth, broadly diversified index funds. Okay. So a lot of people use Robinhood to invest into single stocks and to day trade and to make bets and gambles. Not a fan of that. But you can use Robinhood to buy index ETFs. Okay. That's what I would do. That's what I do. That's where we have our money. So hopefully that helps. All right. Let's see. Victoria says, here's a question about making goals in YNAB. When I allocate activity to a particular goal, it shows that I have reached the goal instead of showing that I've overspent. Is there a way to make it more like a true envelope system? I'm still getting really acclimated to YNAB. I'm very new, so thanks in advance. Okay, so when I allocate money to a particular goal, it shows as I've reached the goal instead of showing that I've overspent. Is there a way to make it more of a true envelope system? Okay, so that question, Victoria, if you're watching this or if you are watching the replay of this, I would email me on this one. Send me a screenshot, and so I can actually see what you're asking. To me, it sounds like there might just be a misunderstanding of how YNAB operates. Because if you're just adding money to a goal, then it shouldn't show overspending. Anyways, so that we can email me on that one, Victoria. Okay. Angela says, looking forward to the call tonight. I have been in Mexico since January. And January is my first month with YNAB. It's worked beautifully because I use debit for most things, which makes it easy to track. However, I've been using cash since getting here and not tracking it very well. Now, with the peso being very devalued, I'm wondering if you have any tips while we wait out the virus situation. Pretty sure the cash thing is just a new habit to develop. Okay. So, couple questions embedded here. Number one, if you are using cash irregularly, or sorry, if you're using cash regularly, not irregularly, regularly, and it's part of your normal habit and daily life, I highly recommend setting, and YNAB, and you're using YNAB, I highly recommend setting up a cash account inside of YNAB. And then manually tracking that cash. Okay, Hannah and I try not to use a lot of cash, but we do use it for laundry in particular, and we pay attention to the cash that we have so that we can see how much laundry we have to spend at the laundromat. But that requires a lot of discipline, and it requires a lot of you have to be diligent to just enter those transactions. If you're like, nope, I'm self-aware and I know that I'm just never going to do that, then what I would do is create one category called ATM withdrawal or cash withdrawal, and set a goal, and it's like $500 a month, or $100 a month, or however much you need. If you're buying groceries and stuff with cash, it's gonna be a lot, right? However much you need per month, and then that's it. You don't get to pull anything else out. Okay, so you budget for getting like $500 out of the bank, and then boom, you're done. You don't get to take any more cash out of the bank for the rest of the month, and you just have to manage what's physically on you. If you don't want to track cash, you need to go that route. That will force you to be diligent with the cash that you have. As far as the peso situation, I'm a big fan of, if you're just visiting, then take out the money you need in American dollars, expense it in YNAB in American dollars. Try not to get too tied up in the whole like different currencies inside of one app. If you are if you're like living in another country and doing a bunch of stuff inside of 2 different currencies, you've got a really complicated setup. I've worked personally with a handful of folks that have this, and we've created unique solutions for every single one of them. Okay, because it's a very nuanced situation. So I've seen people do 2 completely separate budgets, right? So literally just create a new budget inside the same YNAB account, one for their American spending and then one for their foreign spending. And then I've seen people just not track the foreign spending or just not track the American spending and do the cash equivalent like we just did. If you've got a 2 currency situation that you're living in and it's a big part of your day to day, that's going to be that's going to require a special sort of nuanced way of thinking through your specific scenario. If that's you, send me some screenshots, send me an email, and I'll see if I can provide an idea for a direction for you.
Do you want to clarify some? Beth was
Yeah. Okay.
asking. So Dave was talking about just like the percentage that Acorns and those are taking out.
Yeah.
Beth was asking what a good percentage for those is, and then she was like, "What if you want to invest?" So
Okay.
the purpose
So
of those.
Acorns, they have super high fees. $1 a month is super high. Let's say that you have $50. That's a 2% fee. Let's say that's only $10, 10% fee. Not good. Self discipline. Makes sense. I have like $20 a month budgeted in YNAB for Acorns and Stash. So that would be, yeah, if you're doing $20 a month, this is very, so what, like, Hawkeye's got some good thoughts here. $1 a month on $1,000 from Acorn, yeah, it's not a bad percentage. $1 a month on $5, that's 20%, right? That's a huge percentage. So in general, think about it this way. If you go invest with Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, one of the main brokers, and you're investing into a mutual fund, right? A fund that holds a bunch of stocks, they will give you what's called an expense ratio. Okay. That expense ratio is the percentage that you pay to be part of that investment. And it's always a percentage of the money invested. Okay. An amazing expense ratio for index funds, somewhere like Vanguard, is going to be something like 0.1%, 0.12%, 0.15%, 0.17%. If you got a lot of money, 0.07%. You start creeping up to a 0.5% or more, and it's more money than I want to do. I want to go to the more self-discipline route and invest in myself. Okay.
Did you see?
Now, hold on. Oh, which one?
Katie's comment here.
But you do need to pay fees to trade stocks usually. That's why Acorn does. Arrow Investing, what's good percentage? Note, I don't use Acorns myself, but figured I would ask. Yes. Yeah, you do have to pay fees for stocks, right? So if you're day trading, then you've got to pay, transaction fees every time you trade, right? If you're trading with, one of the low fee brokers, maybe it's a couple bucks per trade. If you're trading with, one of the high volume brokers, it's going to be even cheaper. If you're wanting to do that, use something like Robinhood or Webull because those are free. They don't have any. Fees for their trades. If you are wanting to do the more the passive approach, like what I'm talking about, like what Kyle talked about there, like the books that I recommend, then you're looking at expense ratios, okay, for those mutual funds. Now, I'm gonna now argue against myself. Okay, so I'm about to argue against myself and tell you why you should use Acorns. Okay, even though I don't use it. Here's the other argument though. If you know yourself and you know that you won't save that $20, you just won't do it, then yes, use Acorns, pay the $1 fee because $19 saved is better than nothing. If that's you, by all means, please use it. I and Hannah would just like to encourage you, maybe do that for now, but with the long term goal of building that self discipline muscle so that you don't have to rely on a tool sort of playing games to hide it from you. If you're new in personal finance and this is a new world for you, then I think Acorns is a fine place to start. But at some point, you'll want to level up to that next level of saving and investing.
Kyle pointed out that a lot of the investing stuff is covered in resources that you already recommended.
Yeah.
But then you also got a question from Amanda that says, I'm working on debt pay down, so not ready to invest yet. But where would you recommend starting? So do you want to do a plug for your books again?
Yeah, definitely the books. So that's even great, Amanda. Honestly, the best time to start learning about investing is before you are ready to invest, so that when you have the money to invest, you already know what you're going to do. The two books I highly recommend: "Simple Path to Wealth" by J.L. Collins, and "The Boglehead's Guide to Investing." Um, there's a lot of other good ones. Those are a great place to start. You won't go wrong there.
And I'm sticking them in the comments again.
Perfect. Yeah. So we'll include those in the comics and in the description of this video as well.
Let's see, Katie. Did you see this?
What did Katie say? You do need to pay a fee. Oh, yeah. So we answered that one as far as the fees on the stocks.
I just transferred my old 401k
to Betterment and put monthly auto deposits. So that should help you future. Yeah. I've never personally used Betterment, so I don't have a lot of opinions about it, but I've heard really great things from a lot of people, and the general philosophy behind it makes a lot of sense to me. So I think, again, do the education yourself, read a few books to understand the big ideas, and then if Betterment can make a lot of sense. So yeah. Bye, Carrie. Good to see you. Stay safe out there. Okay. All right. I'm going to answer another question from emails. So Tyson said, our budget and accounts are set up as follows. We use a local bank with savings accounts only so that we can make deposits, cash checks, etc. Our main banking is through USAA, which doesn't have a physical location in the area. Our confusion occurs when someone makes a purchase on a credit card and we need to transfer money from these local savings accounts into our main checking account so that we can pay the credit card. We don't know how to track the reimbursements and align that with the original purchase. YNAB won't allow us to categorize these transfers. It grays out. Okay. So if that at all sounds, I actually emailed Tyson on this one. So if he's here, great. If not, check. He'll see it in his email. But again, I'm going to plug that savings account video. We've just gotten a number of savings questions tonight inside of YNAB. So I just want to plug that video again.
And that'll be in the replay.
That'll be in the replay. So the savings account and YNAB video that I did on my channel be really, really helpful for these sorts of questions because there's multiple ways to set up savings accounts in YNAB. And depending on how you set them up will change the way that you handle this situation. So definitely watch that. And then if you still have questions after that, send me an email and let me know.
Tyson is on. Just saying.
Oh, hey, Tyson. Good to see you here. Cool. All right. So let's see. Karen, if my job is lost, finding another one at my age, almost 61, it will be difficult to say the least. So I guess my questions are ideas about frugality. How can I survive until I'm 62 and hope that Social Security will still be there? I'm envisioning living in a travel trailer on a family or friend's property, maybe with a job or several side hustles if I'm lucky. Okay, so part of this, let's answer this a couple ways. One would be the philosophical side of this. Okay, so the philosophical side is, again, plug in that book, The Obstacle is the Way, that I've been reading from. This is where we go back to making a list of what we can and can't control, making a list of what's within our power and what we can focus on and what makes sense. And Karen, if you're here or in this situation, I'm going to be brainstorming all the possible jobs that I could do. Okay. All the possible skill sets that I could have over the course of my career. What skills have I learned? What can I change and do? What can I go ahead?
Just like with the age factor,
yep.
I just would try to not let that limit your mindset about
Totally.
your abilities.
Totally.
And I know that different people have different health situations and all
yes.
that kind of stuff, and we don't know anything about that. But yeah, just don't limit yourself for sure.
Yeah.
Especially now in the age of the internet.
Oh my gosh, there's so much. And
there's so much you can learn.
There's countless examples. One of my favorite things to do in these situations too is to find someone who looks like me, meaning not necessarily race as much, but more of like same socioeconomic background and situation, right? So if you grew up in a tough home life situation, and you have big dreams to do X, Y, or Z thing, I would try to find someone, on the internet, of course, probably, who has done the thing that you want to do, from a similar tough situation, and then use them as inspiration to help push you forward and sort of drive you and say, okay, somebody else has done this, so maybe I can too. In this way, like to give you an extreme example, Colonel Sanders, Google this. So I don't want to be sharing false information. Colonel Sanders was like in his 50s or 60s when he started KFC, or like really when it blew up. And so a lot of people think like if they don't do something in their 20s or 30s, then there's not a chance. He was 65 in 1952 at the age of 65 when most people are looking at slowing down. Harland David Sanders began Kentucky Fried Chicken, 65 years old. So Hannah makes a good point. Don't count yourself out just because of your age. Okay, now on a practical side, you want to get frugal. You're worried about income loss. You're concerned that you might have to tighten the reins. First step is you got to have some kind of budget to at least know how much you're spending. If you're on this call, you're probably familiar with YNAB. You probably have attempted a budget, but the average person is not like you. The average person has no clue how much money they spend on a monthly basis. And if you ask them, they would guess and it would probably be wrong. Most people just don't know, because we humans are terrible at estimating. So that's the first step. You gotta know what your ins and outs are. Step two is to do what we said earlier. If you were to cut everything, I mean, super bare bones it, how much money do you need to make that happen? If you lived in that travel trailer on a family friend's property, how much do you need? Right? If Hannah and I did that, we could go park this trailer right now in one of our parents' driveways, right?
If your mom's still on, she's
And
like, no.
And we could bum off of them for laundry, right? And you know, we could reduce our expenses that way. Okay, if really stuff went sideways, that's an option. So you know, it's at least good to know what your options are, and sort of think through those numbers. All right. Okay. uh, Prashant says he's got a couple different questions, all very YNAB heavy. So some of these I may answer and some I may point to other videos. Okay. How do you manage track payroll deductions in YNAB? Is it really worth it? If not, I don't track them. I've seen people do it. And if you're super duper type A, do it. Do it to it. There are a handful of people that I know that do this. There's actually a YouTuber who I knew that does this. What is her name? I will try and find her name. She does a couple of YNAB videos and she actually tracks payroll deductions. It's impressive. But the way you do this is by doing a big split transaction combined with a scheduled transaction, and you know, put everything on your pay stub in the YNAB. I don't personally do it. I don't think it's worth it. If you're the most type A person that has ever typed A'd, rock and roll, my friend. How do you budget forecast with YNAB? For example, planning for the future years, understand expenses and net worth, were it all laid out if it remains the same? You don't. Sorry, these are harsh answers. YNAB is not a forecasting tool. They actually pride themselves on not being a forecasting tool. So if forecasting in that way, where you can look at net worth, account balances, rollouts, if everything stayed the same, I would build a personal Excel spreadsheet. YNAB. Anastasia, we are saying YNAB, YNAB, if you are not familiar with the term.
That is not the first time somebody's thought that.
No. People think that it's YNAB.
YNAB sounds more fun.
It stands for you need a budget. So type that in, Hannah. Stands for you need a budget. It's called YNAB. Anyways, there's a bunch of videos on my channel about YNAB and how to use it. So yeah, it's a fun tool. Okay. Similar to YNAB, any time management strategies or apps that have similar concepts? Yes, actually. We're big fans of Timular, which actually comes with this cool little cube, and it sits on my desk, and I turn it, and then it tracks like how much time I spend on email, how much time I spend doing maintenance work, how much time I spend doing deep work, how much time I spend thinking and learning. I love it. It's a very similar, it's similar to YNAB in some ways. I mean, you're not actively budgeting your time, but you're tracking your time, and it's really, really cool. You can definitely do YNAB while drinking wine. It could make your numbers wrong depending on how much wine you're drinking.
I tend to drink the wine when we talk about wine.
Hannah will drink the wine.
Yeah. Nick zones into.
I will do the YNAB.
Yeah. I do the wine app. Nick does the wine app.
That's how you do it. If you're looking for good wine, you should go to Empathy Wines. Oh, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you're like doing all the plugs.
All these resources tonight. Okay. Last question from Prashant. Unrelated to YNAB, a better strategy for managing tax paperwork every year. It feels overwhelming and puts me off. Yeah, I'm a big fan of using a tool that will pull a bunch of stuff in for you. So there's TurboTax, there's Tax Act, there's H&R Block. I personally have used Tax Act, TAXACT in the past. We've been using that for 3 or 4 years, and have found it very helpful for us. Other than that, I just have a folder on my computer and I keep anything that is tax related in there because we have a bunch of different clients and make money in multiple different ways from our channel and different things. Our taxes can be a little bit confusing. So I found that if I just have all the right stuff in the same folder and I used one of the software tools, then I can make it through. All right, Christian. Suppose my wife pays off the credit card this month from her checking account. Afterwards, I repay her from mine. How would you enter this transaction into YNAB? I'm confused since that would first require recording a payment in my card that doesn't come from my checking account or from to be budgeted. And then adding to the confusion, I would later have to hold on. Okay. Okay. So adding the confusion, I would later have to enter the corresponding outflow from that account towards a third party, my wife, instead of my credit card, and that requires a specific category for the debit. Okay. So Christian, if you're on or listening, and I'll send an email to Christian as well. This is going to be a complex situation that you're going to need a very nuanced answer for, and I'm going to need more details on it, honestly. If you're married and you're not doing what Hannah and I do, which is we treat all our money the same and throw it in one bucket. If you're doing some sort of split where certain, one person pays for something and the other person pays for this, and you guys pay each other back and keep track of stuff, there's a bunch of different ways to set stuff up. I've helped a handful of different couples do different things. So I have a few ideas on some ways that can work. But just know that you're going to have some more legwork into this. It's not impossible. You just got to put the legwork in to make stuff happen like this. The big idea would be that you need to have a really clear account structure and really clear category structure for how you're transferring this around. So Christian, if you're listening, send me an email and I'll reply to your email and I'm going to ask for some screenshots so I can see what's going on. All right. Is that all the email questions? No, we got one more. Christopher says, YNAB credit card question. I want to pay a portion of the card balance from savings. How do I reserve the money in the savings account for the card? Move money from savings to the card budget. When I actually pay the card directly from savings, how do I categorize the payment? Will it decrease the savings budget category second time? All accounts are linked. Christopher, so I'm going to assume that your savings account is on budget, okay, in YNAB. So watch that savings video. Watch the savings video that we've been talking about. I'm assuming that it's on budget. If it is, then you are correct. You want to transfer money from savings to the card budget. When you actually do pay the card directly from savings, you will categorize the payment. It will not be categorized. It will be a transfer because it's an on-budget account. So there's no category. And then, yes, it will decrease the savings. It will not decrease the savings budget category a second time. Okay, that's if it's on budget. So that answers your questions, hopefully. If it's an off-budget account, I would not pay it from savings. I would move the money from savings to checking and pay it from checking. That's the way I would handle it. That's the cleanest way and the easiest way to track it. All right. I think we got all the emailed questions.
Did you answer Tony's question already?
Tony's? I thought we did.
Did you?
Let me look.
Well, it's under email. How do you answer the question of can I afford this for medium run?
Oh, no. We missed that one. Okay. How do I answer the question, can I afford this for medium or large expenses? I think Hannah, did you say you had some thoughts on this too, or no?
Well, yeah, just that it changes. So when we were still paying off the Airstream, there were technically things that we could afford that we definitely chose to put off. Because it just felt irresponsible. Even if we didn't go and immediately put that money towards the Airstream at that moment, like we might have been hanging on to it for something else.
Yep.
But we deferred a lot of stuff when we had the Airstream payment.
So here's how I respond to Doxy, by the way. Tell her we'll go look at her email. Here's the way that I answer, can I afford something? Okay. Let me explain the way most people answer this question. Most people say, can I afford this? Meaning, can I make the monthly payment? That's how most people answer the question. That is not affording something. Okay. That is making a payment or being able to pay the bill. That's not affording it. The way that I define afford something, the way I think you should define it, is first you have to decide what your long term goals are. How much do you want to be saving for retirement? How much do you want to be making sure you have money for a down payment on a house one day? How much money do you want to have for these big stuff? Okay. Big stuff, long time away. If you decide that you want to be saving 10% or 15% or 20% or 25% of your income for retirement, and then you also decide that you want to be setting aside a little bit of money to build that emergency fund, and then you also want to be setting aside a little bit of money for something else. As long as you do those things, if you can get anything else to fit in the money that's left over in the budget without racking up debt, then you can afford it. And if that's what you really want, you should buy it. That's my definition of afford. So as long as you're hitting all your other long-term goals that you're focused on right now, then you can buy whatever you want with the money that's left over without going into debt. That's what Hannah and I do. The key there is regularly reassessing what the long-term goals are and what that means to be on track towards those. So Hannah and I do planning, on a regular cycle, a few times a year. And we talk about our long-term goals. We talk about what's important to us, and we set a budget for how much needs to be going towards these different things. Anything left over, we'll use that money for the medium and larger purchases that we want. And as long as it's within the budget after that, then you can afford it and by all means rock and roll. So when Hannah was talking about some of the Airstream things, even that we could afford, some we could technically pay for them, but they would inhibit our long-term goals. So we didn't do them. Mm-hmm. And then some, they actually fit into the budget, but there were other more important things that we wanted instead that we prioritized. And so, we recently just did, I'll show you guys briefly. We just recently did a renovation in the Airstream. Mm-hmm. And we put in this new desk area right there and this new couch area right here. We also want to do a renovation where we pull out this, what do they call it? The kitchen counter area. Yeah. The galley is what they call it. We'd like to pull that out and put in a different sort of galley setup. But when we looked at it and brainstormed how much money we were willing to spend, and then what mattered more, we decided the desk and the couch area mattered more to us than the galley and the kitchen area. And so that's what we prioritized, and that's what we did. Okay. Donna says, is there any way to see what we are going to undo like you can in Microsoft Word and Excel? You click the down arrow, it shows you what you did. I would love to know what I'm undoing because sometimes I have no idea what I'm undoing if I hit undo a few times. Unfortunately, the answer is no. Okay. That's the unfortunate answer. So what I would tell you in that scenario is luckily they have undo and a redo. When I've done that to myself, I will literally watch my budget and click undo, try and see what moved and changed. And then if I didn't find it, I click redo. Then I go scroll somewhere else, click undo, and then I click redo. That's super annoying. That's the only way I know how to deal with it. The key is just make sure that if you do need to undo something, you don't refresh your screen, because the second you refresh your screen in YNAB, you won't be able to undo it. Is there any way to know that you moved money from one category to another? No. Also, unfortunate answer to that question. There's not. The way YNAB sees it is you can pay attention to how much money that you have budgeted actively towards something, but you can't really see whether you moved it from one category to another. It really just shows you how much you put in total for the month and then what's left over.
We got a question from Todd in the emails.
Okay, Todd says, how often do you recommend rebalancing your portfolio? I do 80-20 equities in my portfolio with a large emergency fund in the money market. The rebalancing would be in the equities, bond portfolio, etc. Okay, so we kind of answered this question earlier, Tata, if you were here, but I'm actually not a big fan of rebalance. There's merits to both. You can rebalance based on a timeline, or you can rebalance based on percentage bands. So meaning if your ideal is 80-20, if you ever get to like 75-25 or 85-15, then that's a 5% band. So you rebalance. I tend to be more in the band camp. So if I get to that 5% mark, I'm going to rebalance. That's what I do. But if I wasn't going to do that, I'd do it like once a year. A resource on this. This is going to sound a little weird because if you're not in the medical community, it could sound like not making sense. But a good friend of mine named Ryan Inman runs a podcast called Financial Residency. And he mostly talks to physicians, people in the medical space, but he's also just a really smart guy. And he's been putting out some really good podcasts about this crisis and different things to pay attention to. He recently did an episode on tax loss harvesting. And if you're looking to rebalance, I would go check out his podcast on tax loss harvesting, and it's called the Financial Residency Podcast. So check that one out. He does a really good job, knows his stuff, and a really smart guy. Cool. Do we have any other questions? Did we get most of them?
I think we got most of them.
You guys have been hanging out for a while. I really appreciate it. We really we may do this and might have like 2 people, and it's been really fun.
We got something from Christopher right here.
Okay. Chris, okay. I pay a credit card from more than one checking account. Is there a way in YNAB to tell it how much from each account that I'm planning to pay and to remind me of the values when I go to make the payments? Ooh, that's an interesting question, Chris. So there's no way to do it that's going to be quickly and easily seen. But actually, a great place for this would be in the notes of the credit card category. So if you click on the credit card category, like Discover Card or whatever, over on the right-hand side, down in the bottom right-hand corner is a notes section. I would just put a note right there. I've done that before when I've done this. So I would just add a note to that area and say, this much from that checking account and this much from the other. That's what I would do. You could also, yeah, that's what I would do. That's what I would do. Yep. Okay. Did you say we had another one, Hannah?
I think that's it so far.
Okay, cool. I'm just scrolling through here, make sure we got everything. We'll wrap this up. We're coming up on like 2 hours. So, woo! You guys are awesome. Seriously, is this fun? Type in the chat. Like, is this enjoyable? Should we do this more?
For another one.
Good. Okay, good. We'll do this more then. This is kind of a test to see if this is something that people like. I was in the jazz band camp for a summer back in high school. It was fun. Yes. I was in the jazz band for a semester in high school. Cool. Great. All right. And we're going to pay down. Awesome. Jason. Chris. So your question on the credit card thing, Jason actually has a really good suggestion. You could make a credit card payment scheduled and put it like a week or 2 ahead of time so that it reminds you. That's a great suggestion. That'd be more easily seen than the notes section that I suggested earlier. So thanks, Jason, for pointing that out. That's a great suggestion. Cool. All right, y'all. Well, let's wrap it up then. I'm going to read one more section from The Obstacle is the Way, and then we'll get off here. I really appreciate you guys. I'm so glad that that's been fun. It's been, I don't think I could do this without Hannah being here to look at the chat because
I really got the hard part of this job.
I know you got the hard part.
I know. As usual.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to read one last little section of this book. It is page 150.
Katie says she recommends the YNAB book too, just as a.
Oh yeah, the YNAB book is great. Can my dog make another appearance? Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll pull her up.
Yeah,
She's
wait,
sleeping,
Marco.
but
I know.
she's good.
Oof, she's good pull.
Hey, Margot. Say hey.
Marco makes everybody feel better.
Can you snort? Are you good? All right. Okay, so this is a chapter called Love Everything That Happens. And I know this is really hard in like a time like this to love it, to embrace it. But let me read some of this. At age 67, Thomas Edison returned home early one evening from another day at the laboratory. Shortly after dinner, a man came rushing into his house with an urgent news. A fire had broken out at Edison's research and production campus a few miles away. Fire engines from 80 nearby towns rushed the scene, but they could not contain the blaze. Fueled by the strange chemicals in various buildings, green and yellow flames shot up 6 and 7 stories high, threatening to destroy the entire empire that Edison had spent his whole life building. Edison calmly but quickly made his way through the fire, or to the fire, through the now hundreds of onlookers and devastated employees looking for his son. Go and get your mother and all her friends, he told his son with childlike excitement. They'll never see a fire like this again. What? Don't worry, Edison exclaimed. It's all right. We just got rid of a lot of rubbish. That's a pretty amazing reaction, but when you think about it, there was really no other response. What should Edison have done? Wept, gotten angry, quit, and gone home? What exactly would that have accomplished? You know the answer by now, nothing. So he didn't waste time indulging himself. To do great things, we need to be able to endure tragedy and setbacks. We've got to love what we do and all that it entails, good and the bad. We have to learn to find the joy in every single thing that happens. All right, another part of the same chapter. He says, the next step after we discard our expectations and accept what has happened to us is that after understanding certain things, particularly bad things, are outside of our control, the next step is this: loving whatever happens to us and facing it with unfailing cheerfulness. It is the act of turning what we must do into what we get to do. So it's reframing the fact that we must live through this time of the coronavirus into we get to live through this time of the coronavirus. In your worst moments, okay, and then here, we're almost done, you guys. The goal is this. It's not, I'm okay with this. It's not, I think I feel good about this. It's, I feel great about this. Because if it happened, then it was meant to happen. And I'm glad that it did when it did. I am meant to make the best of it. It's not to say that good will always outweigh the bad, or that it comes free without cost. But there is always some good, even if only barely perceptible at first, contained within the bad. And we can find that and be cheerful because of it. So this is where I want you to look through all the good that's coming out of this bad situation. Is there a bunch of bad? Yes. Gosh, yes, of course. But is there some good that we can find? Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I want you guys to focus on, okay? Thank y'all so much for coming and hanging out. Really appreciate it. It means a ton. It means a ton to all of us. Here's our cats too. They've been chilling right here the whole time. Our other dog Scout's down here in the floor. So yeah, we got a full camper here. Seriously, really appreciate y'all. Been super fun. Email us if you have any questions, nick@mappedoutmoney.com. This replay will be up. We'll have all the resources in the description and in the comment section if you need anything or want to refer back to it. And yeah, wish you guys all the best on this Sunday night. Wake up tomorrow morning, ask what opportunities you can take advantage of, and we'll see y'all on the other side. All right, bye.
Bye.